Hello, 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 and welcome to Tea with Halo, which I have my tea here in my lovely Bardic mug with the Arwen on it and the red kite of my local area, Wales. It says a call, an invocation to the inspiration of the Arwen, to hope that that flows through what we are doing, what we are talking about. So this is the podcast at the Enchanted Academy. I am relaunching it after several different varieties. So if you check back at the old episodes, you'll get a whole range of different weird and wonderful things where I've tried different options. But this time around, we're going for a more traditional invite a lovely guest on so that we can have a conversation. So as a magical teacher, I'm really interested and curious about how we both teach and learn the weird and wonderful, and obviously how we re-enchant the world. And part of that is through our work and our engagement with magic. So this is our broad theme, but I fully expect our conversations to be wide-ranging and go off down many different tangents and rabbit holes, because rabbit holes are fun. So today I have, for our first episode, for my first guest, Rachel Patterson, who is a fellow Moonbooks author, who is a general all-round wonderful human being, very, very supportive of authors and pagans and magical people. And I am delighted to invite you on as a guest, because you quite often host things and coordinate things. And so I really fancied hearing what you had to say about your work and about this wonderful world of magic, Rachel. So I'll read your little bio so that people get a sense of you. And then let's dive in. So Rachel is an English witch who has walked the pagan pathway for over 30 years, a best-selling author with over 30 books published. 30. Podcast host, elder and high priestess at the Kitchen Witch online School of Witchcraft, which is a vibrant space. I have to say, I kind of lurk in your Facebook group, and people engage, they ask questions, they do stuff. It's really cool. You've got a really good space there.
We have a lovely community. We're very lucky.
Yeah. And well, it's not just luck though, is it? That's also your effort, your work, that's your care and dedication.
Yeah, it's energies, isn't it? It's energies. It's not just me. Heather and Ness co-run the Kitchen Witch School and the Coven and the Facebook pages. So we're quite hot on the admin side as well, keeping out trolls and keeping things going. But it's a collective energy, which is brilliant.
So, all right, I'm already going off piste, but how do you because of course I am. How do you cultivate that kind of energy in your space? And I want to ask about like your background and things a bit more in a bit, but how do you cultivate an energy that is inviting for people to engage with the magic and with the material in an online community, given all the distractions and everything that goes on and all of the possibilities of information overwhelm?
Energy's at the base of it all, isn't it? It's at the base of magic. I think it's at the base of any relationship as well. We have now the school and the community has been running for I think we're coming up for 14 years now. So that was right at the beginning of good old forums, as they used to be, chat rooms as they used to be originally. I think a part of it is admin, is keeping an eye on stuff, because there are trolls out there. There are, people that want to invade the space. So it's being hot on kicking them out. But I think the main part of it comes from the people that are running any group, running any community. It's your positive energy that has a knock-on effect to everyone else. We think that witchcraft, the knowledge of witchcraft, should be shared, and we think that we should be supporting each other as well. So that's what we try and promote. And I think if you put that out there, then hopefully everyone else joins in and they're all respectful to each other as well. It's a kind of domino effect, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that knowledge of witchcraft, then what is witchcraft for you? And what is paganism for you as well? Like, those are often overlapping.
How many days have we got? It is a huge question, I think. And I am a pagan witch, and I think it's important to know that they are two different things. Paganism being the religion side of it, if you want to call it that. My beliefs are in the old gods. I am supported by the old gods. I walk with the old gods. They provide my support. Folk magic as well. I do work with that, and that comes under witchcraft. Witchcraft being magical practice. So you can theoretically work witchcraft no matter what religion you believe in. So witchcraft is the actual magical practice. But I think paganism and witchcraft do work together very, very nicely. I started out thinking they were separate. I started out thinking that my mundane life was separate to my magical life, but older and hopefully wiser, I'm a witch the whole time now. Doesn't matter what I'm doing, whether I'm working in the office or doing the vacuuming, I'm a witch. I bring all of those beliefs and that magic together. As a combination, it has helped me grow. It has supported me. It's changed me, hopefully to a better person. I like to think so. Calmed me down a bit, mellowed me out a bit. But I think it is about knowing that there's energy in everything, understanding that all people are different, that they have different beliefs, that they have different thoughts, different ways of doing things, and being respectful of that. And the usual, connecting with nature, connecting with all the energies of nature, looking after everything on the planet, whether it's a plant or an animal or a person, really. I mean, I'm not a saint, mixing my religions now completely. I am still human, but I do kind of try and whatever you put out there comes back to you kind of idea.
Yeah.
I try.
And that's all any of us can do, right? But
Yeah.
that's that thing about the energy in holding community. You're talking about that what you're putting out is what you're hoping to cultivate in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when
It's the world, sorry, the world's a weird place at the moment. The world is a terrifying place at the moment. So I think if we can come together and support each other in the little things as well as the big things, then we're making the world a better place, hopefully.
Yeah, that's kind of what I call re-enchanting the world, is that like finding that magic. And it's that piece about it doesn't matter where you are or when you are what you are a witch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or others are druids or magicians or whatever, whether you're in the office having a bad day, having a good day, at your altar in a big ritual, like you're holding that space
Yeah.
for, yeah, that magic. And that I love what you say about that support, walking with the old gods. That very
Wouldn't
much
be without them.
yeah,
Wouldn't be without them.
yeah. So how did you first encounter the old gods? Were you brought up with them, or like many of us?
Well, I was born on Halloween. I was born on Samhain, so I guess it was in, fate. It was in the cards, really. So right from very young, people bought me witchy things, joke witchy things. Samhain and Halloween trick-or-treating wasn't really a thing when I was younger, where I grew up, south of England. It wasn't really a thing. My dad is not a pagan. There aren't spiritual or religious beliefs necessarily in our family. We weren't, I mean, we were brought up with morals and standards and manners, which is brilliant. But my dad was always very, and still is very much interested in history, where our family came from and further back, always interested in Anglo-Saxons and all of the history behind the British Isles. We would be taken to sacred sites, not because they were sacred sites, but because they were historic sites. Going back now to the days when Stonehenge, you could just park on the verge and take your picnic and go and sit in the middle of Stonehenge, eating your sandwiches on the stone in the middle back
Yep.
in the 70s. But he would take us to all of those places, and I think that probably planted something, the seed of something. And with all the history and all of the books and things around, he's very much into nature. I spent a lot of time out in the garden and out with him walking the dog and learning about the birds and the animals, plants. He's a fantastic gardener. He taught me all I know about gardening as well. So I think that kind of seed was planted, but it was only when early 20s I found a book on witchcraft in a charity shop, a history book on witchcraft. Thought that's interesting, bought it, read it, thought that all makes sense. I've the old saying, I felt like I'd come home.
Yeah.
And that was the spark, way before the internet, way before you could connect or find information. So it was a bit of scrabbling about in the dirt in the early days to find information. But I think my dad planted the seed originally for the whole nature, connecting with energy and history of it, really.
That's really cool. I just, because I my teens were about when the internet was starting to become really widespread. We didn't have a computer at home until I was 18, and I found magic 7 or 8 years before that. But so my first introduction to the concept of witchcraft as being a real thing was also a history book in my school library.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. My friends were messing around with ghosts and got really freaked out, and so I went to the library to look for books on ghosts.
I love the library.
Yeah.
Love the library. It's a very underrated source of information.
Right. And I used to spend a lot of time in the library. I'm sure you I used to. I still do on occasion. There's more, it's easier to get things online now, but
Yeah, that's sad, really, a bit, isn't it? Actually, that was my dad again, and my love of reading. He would take us to the library every Saturday morning to get out a stack of books to read.
yeah,
And that was where my love of learning, I guess, learning and reading came from too. And I took my children to libraries as well. It kind of followed generations.
perfect. Well, I think it's really important that, and it's that balance of books and reading and researching and going out and feeling the energy of the sites and being in those spaces.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I'm just thinking about books and the internet and resources. There's so much misinformation on the internet.
Yeah.
Books are where it's at. Books are your facts. Always check the books.
Oh yeah. Though one of the interesting things about that is because it was the sort of mid 90s where I was getting all the books I could find, still not on the internet. And over the 2000s, I was then hearing people critiquing those books from the mid 90s and going, actually, the history in them, not so great. It's mythologized, it's rooted in this thing from the 70s,
Yeah.
the Murray hypothesis. So how do you feel about that, like that space of like books are far more reliable than the internet because you can see who's written it, where it's come from, if they're well
Yeah.
cited, etc. But like how do you reconcile that? How do you feel about that piece, that our understanding of history and that the facts about things actually do change?
I
Just to put
think
you on the
if we
spot.
got, I know it's fine. I think if we met up with the doctor and got in his TARDIS and visited all of those sites, our whole understanding of history would change completely. Because let's face it, a big percentage of it is guesswork, educated guesswork. But we're never going to know for sure, are we? But I know what you mean about the books, because the first books I managed to get hold of were American Wicca,
Mm-hmm.
because that's all there was at the time.
Yep.
Not my pathway now, but I certainly learnt from it. It gave me a good structure, a good base. But there are parts of that now that we look back on and think, oh no, we don't do it like that anymore. Oh no, that wasn't quite right. Is that perhaps just, I think witchcraft evolves. And I think it has to evolve to a certain degree, because I do work magic now with my mobile phone. You can work magic. You can put vision boards on your desktop computer screen, and you can bring modern technology into working magic because it's all energy.
Oh yeah.
Computers, phones, they've all got energy. So I think it has to be a bit fluid and change with the times. Having said that, my own practice has gone backwards to a lot of original folk magic with the herbs, with the spells, and because that appeals to me. So I think it's about being open with it all and knowing that perhaps one of the things I love about witchcraft is that you can make it personal to your own journey, your own pathway. It's not absolutely rigid. You can tailor it to make it your own. And I think that's what you have to do, really. Just because it's old doesn't necessarily make it right or wrong. Just because it's new doesn't necessarily make it right or wrong. But I think with history, myths, and legends, perhaps go back as far as you can. When I was researching the Sulis book, for example, I went back to archaeological evidence because that's all there is, really. She's not written about anywhere else. But it was the archaeological evidence that I started with for writing the book, because that's the oldest and most reliable source there was. And then you get all of the Roman scholars that wrote things down and the good old monks that wrote things down. But again, they were only their interpretations. So who knows whether they were writing exactly what happened. Yeah, we have no idea, really, do we? But I think going back to as far back to the source as you can really helps, particularly if you are looking at something like the gods or the goddesses, or something that is historic, for want of a better word. But it's a bit of a minefield, particularly with the internet as well. I mean, you see memes every day with quotes from people that they probably never said. So fact check as far back as you can.
Well, one of the things that I really like about your Sulis book is the way, so you go back to the archaeological sources, but you also and it's a pagan portal, so it's only 25,000 words. It's pocket size. So like I love that size of a book. Is
Bite
like,
size, they're good, aren't they? Yeah.
well, and you the reason I love it is something that you do very well in this. You go back to the archaeology and you bring in the sources and you say, this is what we know, this is how it's been interpreted by others. And then what you do is you actually talk about how you and your coven mates, your working, the people you work with, have encountered Sulis herself. And I think for me, like that combination of what do we know historically and who are we meeting now when we stand on that foundation? Who are the gods when we meet them now? Who are they to us? So you do this so beautifully because you make it really clear, which is very important. A lot of people don't do this. They muddle it up. They start with the source and then they talk about their experiences and they say this is all true. You make it so clear which bits are coming from where, which means that that book works as a beautiful introduction to meeting, an introduction. It's you introducing someone to a being, to an energy, to a power, to Sulis.
Yeah.
And they can then build their own relationship. It's masterfully done.
Oh, thank you. I think particularly with her, there's so little information about her. There isn't this whole list of rituals and practices, and no one knows how she was worshipped. We know she was ancient. We know she was there for a long, long time before the Romans, because we've got archaeological evidence that people were throwing things in her throwing things in her water, like we do as humans, like to chuck stuff in the water.
Yeah.
So the way that you work with her has to be your own journey, because there are no records of anything else, and it will be different for each person. I think that's the same with any deity. Your relationship with them will be very different. But I also think it's important, particularly with her. I did an interesting thing, well, interesting to me, when I was writing the book. I thought, let's Google her and see what correspondences people have for her, just purely out of interest, because again, she's got no correspondences, nothing was written down. And I found a website and I found all these correspondences, these animals, these shapes, these symbols, these herbs. Looked at the next website, exactly the same, like literally copy and paste. Looked at the next, there's not a huge amount out there, but the handful of websites I found, all the information was exactly the same, literally copied and pasted, but none of them made sense. None of the correspondences made sense from what I knew about her. And I think that's important. And it's something that I've taken going forward with me. If I'm giving a correspondence for a deity, a plant, a herb, a food, a symbol, I want to know why it's a correspondence, what connection it has to that deity. And I think that's really important for anybody to investigate. Don't just take that list of correspondences and go, oh yeah, I'll give those offerings because that's what that list says. Why are they correspondences? What makes that connection to that deity? And that's something that I actually took from writing the Sulis book moving forward, that I'm doing a lot more now, is asking that question. Why is that a correspondence? What connection has it got? Again, that's probably going to be a bit more personal too.
Yeah. So what do you think it is that makes something, like, that makes a herb belong to a deity? What's the point of a correspondence, for starters?
Good question. Very good question. We get all these lists, don't we? I don't think anybody's ever said what does a correspondence do. For me, a lot of it is offerings or putting an altar together, and those are the connections, and animals as well. My main spirit animal guide is a wild boar, and he's been with me for many, many years. And I found that the deities I work with usually have that similar collection as well. The Kalach is one of my main, well, she's the main deity I work with. She's connected to pigs and sows and boars. And actually, Sulis is the same. There's a myth that goes with the creation of the city of Bath that has a sow pig story connected to it. So there's a connection there because there's a connection with pigs to the city of Bath, and that's the only place that you'll find Sulis. So that for me is a personal one because I already work with pig and with boar, so that was quite a nice connection. But I think, and funny enough, I've just been looking up herbs to connect with Sabbats because we're running a Wheel of the Year workshop. For me, that the connection has to be, are the plants growing at that time of the year? I don't want strawberries in December because they're not around. So plants have to be associated with the time of year if you're working with a Sabbat, and also the energy of that Sabbat. And I think the same is with deities. If you are working with a warrior deity or a love deity, then use a herb or a flower or a plant that has that same energy. So off the top of my head, Aphrodite, who I don't work with, but she's the first love goddess that jumped into my head. For me, I think that would be roses, because roses are very much a symbol of love. There's got to be, for me, that reason that there's a correspondence. And then you could give her offerings of roses. You could put roses on the altars. I work with the Kalak. She's a little old lady. She's a ferocious, feisty, cranky old lady, but she's an old lady. She likes boiled sweets. She likes boiled candy. All old ladies have boiled candy and boiled sweets in their handbags. So I actually quite often make her offerings of boiled sweets because that makes sense to me. Although, to be fair, deities often ask for things in particular. Sulis quite often asks me for grapes. And I think that's, although she's ancient, way before the Romans, I think she loved that the Romans built her a temple. Wow. Liking this. Yeah, carry on. Yeah. And when she appears to me, she doesn't appear to me as the ancient pre-Roman deity. She appears to me in all her Roman finery. So grapes works for her because that's very Roman. glass of wine, that kind of thing. It's those connections, but I think mainly for your altar, for offerings, symbols that connect with that energy so that you can connect with them, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. Yeah. So when you first started out, and obviously you were growing up with your dad, like taking you to these sacred sites, and that what you were talking about him teaching you gardening, that to me is very much about is a very much a practice that helps support feeling the energy of things and paying
Yeah.
attention and your intuition. So
Yeah.
you've talked a bit about all of having those skills so that when you found your book in the secondhand shop, like it kind of all, you had some of those pieces already. But what do you actually wish that you knew when you started?
Ooh, that I didn't need a whole list of shopping stuff. And perhaps that's because when I started it was Wicca, which is very structured and very ceremonial. I had a shopping list as long as my arm, chalice, cauldron, athame, wands, candles in all the colors.
Yep.
There are various things that I've never used a bell. I've never used my athame, really. I think I've got a whole collection of wands. I think I probably used them once. There's things that don't really resonate with my practice and never had, but I thought I had to have it all. And I thought I had to have the cloaks and the whole Stevie Nicks wardrobe and all of that stuff. And, I have done that. I've done a lot of the ceremonial stuff, and it's interesting to do. And maybe it was right for the time. Maybe it was right for my journey then. I'm a kitchen witch, hedge witch now, so I work magic with whatever I've got to hand. I have cloaks that are gathering dust because let's face it, cloaks are totally impractical when you're outside trying to light candles or jump bonfires, or not practical whatsoever.
Especially the
But
cotton
yeah,
velvet ones that are really
oh yes,
beautiful, but they're synthetic and they're just
flammable.
flammable, not waterproof. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's that. I think it's that you don't need all that paraphernalia. I mean, I've got that side altar with bits and bobs on, but you don't need all of that paraphernalia. I think that was one thing that perhaps would have been useful. I probably wouldn't have listened at the time anyway. I probably would have bought it all, but and to follow your intuition. I think your intuition to me is a real big thing. And I don't think that's just to do with witchcraft or magic. I think that's in general. The amount of times in my life that I have ignored that gut feeling and it's all gone topsy-turvy is, you learn from it, I guess. But intuition, I think, is key as well. Learning to trust that. But I think that takes time and experience as well.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, so like that's both of those pieces really good advice. Like you don't need all the paraphernalia, though it can be fun, and
Yeah.
some people really love it, and for some paths, some
Oh
traditions,
yeah, not
it's really
judging.
useful. Yeah. Like I have all of the gubbins from my
Yep.
like almost 30 years, similar like roots and what have you. And yes, I don't use all the things that I thought I would when I started. But how the question there is like, how do you know what to start with? Like, where do you start if it isn't with getting the tools that are on the shopping lists? And how do you start to actually develop that intuitive? It's not developing your intuition because we all have the intuition, but how do you start to know what is your intuition speaking to you so that you can listen to that gut feeling? Any tips?
I think the intuition is experience, isn't it? It is something that you do learn over time, that you listen, and you'll make mistakes along the way. And I think perhaps that's part of it as well, is making mistakes because you do learn from them. I think there's no shortcut to experience.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly these days when the whole world seems to be very instant. We want everything, we want it now, right now. And whilst that is one of my personality traits, not having any patience, I think there is no shortcut to having that experience and learning and doing things. It's a bit like spells. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, well, how do you work your first spell? I'm worried. I'm scared it's going to go wrong. What if it does this? What if it does that? You've got to do it. You've just got to do it. The only way you're going to learn what works, what doesn't work, is by doing it. And I think perhaps that goes for all of the witchcraft journey. You've got to try it and see what works. I still remember my first spell and how silly I felt. Saying these funny words and, you know, sprinkling stuff and doing a ritual in my dining room, waving my wand around, trying not to knock all the ornaments off, thinking I feel like a complete and utter Wally doing this. But it's each time you do it, you learn something from it, and each time you do it, you feel more comfortable doing it. And particularly as well as spells, I guess, keep a journal, because then you know what works, what doesn't work, what needs tweaking.
Yeah.
And you just got to do it and learn from it.
Yeah. I think the journal, the witch's journal, or whichever path you're on, like that is the essential, primary, and probably only magical tool that you need, is some way of keeping a record that you can look back on, because our memories are imperfect.
Oh, my memory's rubbish.
Oh yeah.
I have lists everywhere. But I am a bad journaler, very bad journaler.
Me too.
I buy the beautiful journals right on the first page, and that's it. But with spells, I did keep a record going from the beginning. And it is interesting to look back and see what worked, what didn't work, why it didn't work. But I think today's day and age, you don't even have to write it down. You can keep it all online, keep it on the computer, video journals. It doesn't have to be sitting writing with your quill pen in a book. You can keep it all online, so it is much easier, even on your phone. I mean, you record stuff on your phone now, can't you? So it's much easier to record all of that.
I know people who keep all of their dreams and spell workings and things in Google Docs because they're searchable. So you can search for key phrases, for images, because once you've got 10 years of, I mean, I've got bookshelves full of journals from, you know, whatever. And I'm like, if I want to try and look back to where have I had these experiences before? How did these, I've got to remember which book it's in. Now I do, because I remember tactile things. So it's like that kind of works, but I'm sure there are things that I'm missing because my memory is perfect. So yeah, there's that kind of trade-off, isn't there?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, a lot of my older stuff is in blog form, because that's where I wrote it down, or even in my books as well.
Yeah.
My first book that I wrote, I wouldn't write it like that now, because my journey's changed completely.
Oh, likewise. Absolutely. And yet it meant so much to me at that time. I'm sure yours did as well. Like, and so I know for me, I have to trust that it's out in the world and that it will reach people when they are at a similar point in their journey and they need it. And that's what they need, even if it's not. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What was your first book?
My first book was with Moon Books. Never had any desire to write a book before. I'd written a few magazine articles. I'd just launched the Kitchen Witch online school. That was all going ahead. I had a real job out of the real world too. Still do have a real job. People, you cannot make a living as an author. Yeah, it doesn't happen. And Trevor from Moon Books was looking for subjects. He just launched the Pagan Portals series. And I said, what about Kitchen Witchcraft? And he said, will you write it? So, Trevor, it's all your fault. 13 years later, 31 books later, that's what started it all. So it was the Pagan Portals Kitchen Witchcraft. That was the first one.
Your first one. Yeah. Well, we can.
It's now a bestseller. It is now a bestseller, which I am eternally grateful for.
And it's that really fascinating thing. I suppose we go back to the books in the 90s. Like, we look back at them today and go, oh, they're like there's some bias and things there. We look back on the books that we wrote earlier on our journey and go, oh, I wouldn't write it like that now, or I don't do things like that now. And so this sort of, for me, ties in with that piece about it's not just about the book learning, but you do need to continue. If you're engaging this journey and you're using materials that you find in books, to continue researching them, to continue reading up on them, and not think at any point that your journey is done, that you know everything there is to know. Like,
Oh, no, still
you know,
learning,
you can go and
still
meet
learning.
new goddesses.
I still take courses and work my way through learning processes, and there's always something new or different ways of learning. I learn from my students, I learn from the chats and the online communities, because everyone looks at things from a different perspective.
Yep.
So you're always learning. Oh, they do it like that. That's interesting. I'll give that a try. So yeah, always learning.
So when you're approaching learning, or in fact, it's a more interesting one, when you're approaching teaching something or sharing something that you've learned, what do you find is a good way of supporting other people in their learning journey when you're sharing something, if they're on a learning journey, because you've got students? So what's a useful skill? What's the most important skill as a teacher? How do you support them in that journey? However you want to answer that.
I think you have to make them work for it. I'm sorry, people, but there it is. You can give them information. You can give people information. And I've done courses that have been, read this text, here's some questions. The answer to question 1 is in the first paragraph. The answer to question 2 is in the second paragraph. Yawn, yawn. You don't learn anything from that. You won't learn anything from answering the questions just by copying and pasting off the internet either. So we do make our students work for it. And I think it's about doing that practical stuff. Here's the subject, here's some information, but go and look for more. Go and research it, go and find your own information. And then here's practical exercises for you to do. Here are things that you need to work through to really learn that subject. Do this, but how did you do this? Or find a way to do this, so that people actually engage with. And this witchcraft is a magical practice. It is a physical, hands-on practice. So go and do it. Go and make that spell. Go and do that divination. Go and look at that tree and find out all about it. And so it's actually, I'll use the word pushing, but in the nicest sense of the word, people to actually go and find out for themselves how they work with it and how they can practically work with it. Reading's brilliant because, you know, both authors, we want people to read the book, but you then want people to go and find out for themselves. We want that to be a spark so that they can go and then investigate further.
Yeah, I think of my books as being, they're like introductions, or as in like introducing someone to someone, so
Yeah.
that you can then go and build that relationship. Or I'm opening a door to a space and going, it's up to you if you walk through it.
Yeah.
And if you don't walk through it, then you're not being a witch, you're not being a magical practitioner, you're not being what, because it's not about what you know, it's about what you do and how you are in the world.
Yeah. And I've been there. I've done it myself. The
Oh
first
yeah.
few years, I read books.
Yep.
That's all I could get hold of. I read books. I was what I call a book witch. I could tell you all sorts of things from the books that I'd read, but it wasn't till I actually got out there and started doing it that I really learnt about it and about myself as well.
Yes. So what's one of the big things that you learn about yourself doing in your witchy journey that you don't think you'd have learned about yourself if you hadn't engaged
This will
in?
be no surprise to anyone, but I am an organized control freak. This just is how I am. I've learnt, and it's witchcraft that's really taught me that, bit of witchcraft, bit of shadow work, whatever it might be, to stop and think. I don't knee-jerk react like I used to. Oh, the trouble I used to get myself in, just blurting stuff as a reaction. It's taught me to stop and think about things. And also things like not everyone's going to react how you think they should or how you want them to. And it's witchcraft that's taught me that as well, that everyone is entitled to act or react how they want to. It's not your place to judge that. And that for me has really helped me as a person mellow out. I mean, age has probably got a lot to do with it as well, getting older, heading towards the crone years. But that, I think, is what witchcraft, particularly doing the shadow work, taught me, that I want people to do things that or react how I think they should, or to treat others how I think they should. But actually, it's not going to happen generally. And it's not my place to judge that. And to just keep scrolling.
Yeah.
Or, social media, instead of stopping and jumping in and arguing, do you know what? Just keep strolling.
Yeah, sometimes it's all you can do, isn't it?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'd like to ask, because I kind of want to highlight this for people, and we've touched on it throughout, is that it's easy to find practices, and it's easy to find like rituals and things that people say you should do. So like some of the basics are like journaling, or like meditation, or following the moon, or there are things that it's like you should do these things, you should go and make
Yeah.
yourself a wand. So in what ways have you, or do you like to adapt those things for yourself? Like when you find a you should do this, or a recommendation or a practice, and you're like, actually I want what that practice will result in. So like meditation, I want to develop those skills, I want to develop the calm, the whatever, but the way this is being presented doesn't work for me. How do you go about adapting that for you?
Is that perhaps a confidence that comes with experience, knowing that you can adapt it? Meditation, for example, when I first started out, I thought you had to have your yoga mat and you light your candles and your incense and sit there for an hour in deep contemplation. But then children came along and I was working full time, and you can't do that. Most people don't have a lot of time to do that. So I had to take what I could. And even if that was 5 minutes shut in the bathroom when I was having my shower and meditating, it was adapting it to work for me, and that realization that that's all I could get at the time. But actually, if that's all you can get, then go for it, because that works. But I think perhaps that is something that has come with time, with experience. But unless you try it, you're not gonna find out. I started out with the very structured Wiccan rituals, which are brilliant, and actually most groups use that sort of standard structured, and it's circle casting, call the quarters, blah blah blah, because it works.
Yes.
But actually, if you're short on time, or if if you don't want to work with deities, you don't have to call them in, and you're not going to get struck down by lightning because of it. But again, that is perhaps experience and the confidence that comes with that. We did quite a lot of open rituals at one time, pre-COVID. Someone went the wrong way round casting the circle. Oh no, that's the end of the world. No, it's not the end of the world. The gods have a sense of humor. They are not going to scorch the earth because you walked the wrong way around the circle casting it. And it's perhaps that comes with experience. You don't panic about that kind of stuff. But you got to try it. You got to try it to see whether it works. And if it doesn't, tweak it a little or talk to other people. I think that's one of the nice things about having this huge online community that we've got. Put it out there. Actually, I like to meditate, but I only have 10 minutes. How do I do it? And see what other people say, because you'll probably learn something, because someone else will be in exactly the same position, but they may have worked out a better way of doing it. So be open to leaning on other people and asking for advice as well.
I love that. And that brings us kind of full circle to the how do you hold space for community that re-enchants the world and that brings magic in, and that's talk to each other and listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many people are in the same situation as you. When I was learning, pre-internet, I thought I was the only witch in my area. I was not at all, but I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, I knew I was the only person who was willing to admit to being a witch while I was in school, because there were a
Right,
couple of my friends who stopped being friends with me because I wouldn't say that I'd stopped doing witchcraft, because that was a lie. So why would I say that? And they're
right.
like, well, we're going to carry on, but we're just not going to tell anyone. And we're going to tell everyone we stopped, and you can't be our friend if you. And I'm like, but I don't want
Oh,
to be your friend if I have
kids.
to hide something that's so important to me.
I say kids, but actually adults are probably just as bad, aren't they?
Yeah. So that there's that thing of like, I know I was the only one at school who was willing to admit to it, but there are plenty of people out there who are doing weird with a Y and wonderful things that might just be a bit shy about it, and sometimes for good
Yeah.
reason. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky that I've never had any adverse reaction. What I have had is people laughing because they don't believe witches are real. I've
Oh
had
yes.
that. And my children had that at school as well. They got to the point where they didn't mention what their mum did
Yeah.
because people laughed and didn't believe it. I've had that, but luckily I've not had anything, nasty reactions yet.
Yeah. And this is why there is other language as well if people want to use it, um, like that has less of a provocative response in certain places.
Yes, I usually lead with the pagan word first. If that goes down okay,
Yeah.
then I might bring in the witch word.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's part of being in the wider community of the world, is knowing where do
Yeah.
we use which language, pun not intended, um, and paying attention to that intuition, that gut feeling of like, where is it
Yeah.
appropriate, safe, comfortable, and where do we want to keep things private? Like even if it's not a risk, even if there's not like we're not going to get adverse responses to it, it's like, well, maybe I want to keep this part of my life private in this space. Maybe I
I think
don't.
I'm way past that.
I mean, I am absolutely,
So far out there. There's no
absolutely.
turning back.
But this is the piece, like for other people like you and I, we're obviously very very out in the world,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that it even doesn't mean that we have to share every part of our practice. There's quite a
No.
lot that I don't share because it's personal, it's private, it's not secret, it's not shameful, it's just private between me and my gods and my spirits. So
We had this with the open rituals. Someone asked us once about the open rituals and how we felt about putting our practices out there. And we felt we had to explain the open rituals are they're very different to the rituals that myself and Ness and Heather do together.
mm,
They're very private. The open rituals are very different because they are open to everyone and anyone that's there, and anyone that's walking past. We've had people walking past just come and join before now. The rituals that I do myself are very different.
yeah,
Different places, different situations require different handling.
yeah. And I do think sometimes that the wider internet audience forgets that.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So I think it's time to sort of start wrapping up, and I've got two more questions for you, and then I'd like to invite you to share a practical thing for people. So my other two questions that I would really like to ask you is, and we've touched on the first one a little bit, and that's how do we strengthen our communities as pagans, as witches, as magical folk? How do we strengthen the communities that we have? And you've talked a bit about nurturing the one that you have built, but wider than that. And the other is sort of part of that is like, how would you say that we can, what's a fundamental thing that we can do to re-enchant our lives in the world?
I think at the core of it all, perhaps, is respecting others. others' wishes, others' beliefs, others' way of thinking. Community is really important. And we found this in lockdown.
Mm.
The world was turned upside down. It was such a bizarre experience. And all of a sudden, we lost our open rituals, we lost our moots, we lost our events. And actually, I think for me, the big positive to come out of that was the online community that grew from that. I started doing weekly online chats, really originally to keep myself in contact with everyone. But it's grown from there, and we've now built an enormous community, which is fantastic. And from that, it's not just my connection to them and them to me. They've all formed connections with each other too by discovering they are close to each other or that they've got similar interests. So friendships have hived off from that as well. So I think it's important to keep that going. There was a big panic when things started opening up. I had so many messages from people saying, you are going to keep doing the online stuff, aren't you? Because there's a lot of people that are perhaps still in the broom closet, or a lot of people that can't get out and about. And that this whole internet community opened up a huge world for them. And they were worried that it was going to go away, and it hasn't. It has just grown from there, really. So I think it's about keeping that rolling and opening the door for new folk to come in as well. But it is just about generally being a decent human being, listening to others, supporting others, being there for others, and respecting. At the heart of it is respect, really. That goes for anything, really, I think.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful and so true. So for those of our listeners who want to explore a practice, or think about something magical to deepen into their magical connection, however you want to put it, like what would you like to offer to them today?
That the answer to that, whenever that question's asked, people usually say nature. Nature's at the base of it, whether you are a druid, a witch, whatever, nature. And I think to a certain degree that is correct, because nature has energy running through every single piece of it, whether it's a blade of grass or a tree or a rock or your house. Don't forget the mundane stuff. Your house has energy. The land beneath your house has energy. Your garden has energy. You don't need to travel miles to a sacred site. My garden is my sanctuary. My house is my sanctuary. Everything has energy. Connect with the energy around you. That for me is a starting point. I talk to my house. I tell it when I'm going out. I say hello to it when I come back in. Everything has that energy. So just little things. It doesn't need to be something grand. You don't need to go on a huge pilgrimage to sacred places. Go on a pilgrimage to your back garden. Or just open the window. Every day I check in with the energy of the day. I let the dog out, first thing in the morning, and I breathe in and what's the energy of today? So for me, I think connection is your starting point, connecting to the energy around you and recognizing the changes in it.
I really like that. And that sounds like a very good way of training up your intuition as well, and the ability to listen to that intuition.
Goes hand in hand. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what exercise do you have for people?
This was an interesting question actually that came up last week when I was doing my weekly chat. And I was doing something completely unrelated. And the question, what's missing, was what I was actually doing. And that kind of expanded to what's missing from witchcraft today? What's missing from this modern witchcraft? And I put the question out there, and it was interesting the answers that came back. And a lot of it was respect, honesty, integrity. And I think that's a whole internet thing rather than just the witchcraft. But then I went on from that and I thought, what's missing from my own witchcraft? What's missing from my own practice? And so that's my question to people. Ask that question of yourself, see what pops into your head, but also take some time go away and meditate with it and take a deeper look at what's missing from your own witchcraft pathway. It might be that a deity comes to you. It might be that a different subject, different type of divination, different type of magic comes to you. It might be that a completely different pathway presents itself. It might be just my one was, or what it seemed to be for most of the people last week, was time is missing. The time to actually practice. And I absolutely understand that. But when I meditated, my answer was structure of a daily practice. That's what's missing. I've got all to set up. I do work spells. I do this. I do that. I blah blah. I write about a lot of stuff, but my actual structure of my daily practice is very, very much missing. So that was my take from it, and I am going to work on that. So that's my question to people. Take that question, what's missing from my witchcraft practice, and sit with it and see what answers you get.
I think that's a wonderful question.
Yeah, it was one of those things that just, it grew from a very small thing I was doing with something else.
It's also a fascinating one to end our first Tea with Halo podcast episode with. We're going to begin with asking ourselves, with you, the audience, asking yourself, like, what's missing from your practice? What's missing from your witchcraft, from your witchy path, from your magical path? And really sitting with that and opening up that space to see what comes next. What can you invite in? What do you need to be paying attention for? I love it. Absolutely love it as a starting place. Thank you so much.
Hopefully people will be surprised, nicely surprised.
Yeah. So where can people find you after
you can't avoid me, really. My website's probably the best place to start, rachelpatterson.co.uk, or the Kitchen Witch Hearth, kitchenwitchhearth.net website. They've both got links to all of our events, to all of our social media, to the school, to everything.
Marvelous. And what's the next big thing that you'd like to, or small thing that you'd like to invite people to come along to if they'd like to spend more time with you, learn from you? Maybe your chat, maybe you've got a class coming up.
I do the weekly chat, and that is such great fun. Every Friday morning, 9 a.m. UK time. It's on replay as well on my YouTube channel, on Facebook. We have a different subject each week. Everyone gets to put their input. We always go off of topic. We never know where we're going to end up, so that's great fun. But if people are looking for support and community, myself, Ness and Heather are here. Never ever feel that you are alone on this journey. We are happy to answer questions. We're happy to provide support in any way that we can. You can find our contact details on our websites. Reach out. If we can help you, we will.
Beautiful. And having met Rachel in person and worked with her, and met Ness and Heather as well, I can say that that is absolutely true. These are lovely, lovely people. So do feel free to reach out to them, and to myself as well. Like, we are here. The reason we put ourselves out there publicly is because we want to be able to support people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Rachel, for coming on with me today. It's been an absolute delight. I love working with you in general. You are a wonderful, wonderful person. And
thank you. Make me blush.
Good. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of the day. The sun is just setting where I am. I can just see it, so we might be able to catch a few rays before night sets in.
No, we're in that liminal space now. That's the magical bit.
Oh yeah. So to our listeners, thank you very much for for listening in to this episode of Tea with Halo, which was Tea with Rachel Patterson. And remember, you can join us in the Enchanted Academy to practice, to discuss, there are several monthly circles on different topics, including working with the Fae at the full moon, and the embodied witchcraft crimson circles, monthly storytelling. And this month, no, I'm going to say this month because this is when we're recording it, but there will be a book launch on the 28th of January. So this episode is going to come out just after that. You can come along, catch the replay in the Enchanted Academy. You can find all the details for that at theenchantedacademy.com or haloquin.net or wherever you find me. Find all of the links in the description below, including links to all of Rachel's places and the websites and the Kitchen Witch Hearth. And I do encourage you to follow your intuition and step into those community spaces and go and connect. Go and ask questions. They can be deep and profound or silly and frivolous. They can be from the very beginning of a journey going, I don't know what this, like, what's the correspondence? Through right the way through to, I've been doing this for 10 years and for some reason I've never quite got the hang of this. Like, all of it is welcome, because we're all somewhere along that journey and we all learn from each other. As Rachel says, not only do we learn from our teachers, but we learn from our students, we learn from our community, and community is where we will and where we do find that ability to enchant our lives, to bring that magic in, to hone our skills, to make connection, and to re-enchant the world. Thank you, and until next time, may your world, your path, your way be full of beauty, love, delight, and may it always be enchanted. Button. Who's got the button?